Hello, darlings. How are you? I hope your week is going beautifully. You're with me, Ed Stott, on That's Helpful, the podcast where we're building our best lives one episode at a time. Tell me this, how often do you catch up with your friends? Friendships are life-enhancing, but so often they get pushed to the side by romantic relationships, children, and generally busy lives. But Lydia Denworth is a science writer who's been examining the monumental health benefits of friendship for years now. And she says you should be making your mates much more of a priority. As someone who has often been guilty of neglecting friendships, this conversation blew my mind. Lydia explains how good friendships are the key to living longer, the incredible impact they have upon us, not just mentally, but physically, and how we can maintain the kind of close friendships that can actually be much more life-enhancing than the romantic ones we often prioritize. Before we get into that, though, you know that here on That's Helpful, we are all about getting more out of life with minimal effort. This year, one of the big things that's made a huge difference to both my time and my health is outsourcing my meal prep to YouFoods. I'm eating more healthily. I don't have to try and think of nutritious recipes to keep lunchtime interesting. And I've got my Sundays back from meal prep hell. YouFoods take the stress out of meal prepping and take on the mental load of making sure your meals are fresh, healthy, and nutritionally balanced. They're always adding new meals, tweaking recipes to keep it even more delicious than ever before. And best of all, there's no cooking, no cleanup, and no dishes. How good! Every week you choose from 60 meals, let gourmet chefs whip them up for you and have them delivered to your door fresh, never frozen. Make sure you use my code HELPFUL, HELPFUL, for up to $200 off your first 5 boxes, or check out the link in the show notes. Let's get into today's show. Lydia Denworth is a science writer and the author of Friendship, the Evolution, Biology, and Extraordinary Power of Life's Fundamental Bond. Why is friendship such a focus of your work in particular?
Well, who doesn't care about friendship, right? I mean, it was personally interesting. I was at a point in my life when I started working on this book where my kids were growing up and out, and I was, thinking more about the next phase of life, and suddenly thinking, that maybe I should check on the status of my friendships or my, tend to my friendships a bit more, and that they were going to become more, I was going to have more time. But that also makes you very aware of the time you didn't spend and maybe should have. But also just as a science journalist, I was noticing it's my job to listen in when scientists talk and to talk to them about what they think is interesting and important and what's different in what they're working on. And I felt like I was hearing a lot about friendship in this new way, that it was being treated with a different level of respect, by very serious scientists, by not the ones you would assume, not just psychologists and social scientists, but by neuroscientists and evolutionary biologists. And for a long time, friendship was seen as a little squishy. It's hard to define, hard to measure, and therefore a little bit hard to study. And so it took a while, when scientists started to take relationships seriously. They didn't start with friendship, right? They got there later. So anyway, I thought there was a lot of interesting work out there, and I thought that it was a topic that most everyone is interested in one way or another.
What do you think caused that shift in terms of scientists starting to become interested in the real impacts of friendship in our lives?
A couple things happened. One is that the way there was a shift in terms of health in how people thought about in medicine and health for a long time. Infectious disease was the number one concern. It was the top killer in the early part of the 20th century. And then we basically invented vaccinations and sanitation and some other things that really changed it made it, okay, COVID-19 notwithstanding, infectious disease has been much less of a concern. And that meant that chronic diseases like cancer and heart disease started to become the number one killers of people. And so then researchers and doctors started looking for the causes of those chronic diseases, and they lie more in the way people live their lives. So they started looking for risk factors. They think about, like, do you smoke? Do you drink? Do you exercise? All those things. And along the way there, they started doing really big studies of thousands of people over long periods of time. And just a few people started to ask about social connection. Like, how was, there were just a handful of really simplistic questions, like, are you married? Do you belong to a church? Or, how often do you see your friends? And the very first study that looked at this and asked this question about how social relationships might be related to health, came out in 1979, and it looked at some data from a county in California that was tracking, just like I said, risk factors for heart disease and things like that. But they noticed that people who started the study with reporting less social connection were more likely to have died 9 years later than people who reported themselves as being very connected. And this was just the beginning, and it was a correlation, right? It's just two things that are true, and you don't know that one is causing the other. But it was really intriguing. And from there, a whole world of research has continued and grown and built on itself. And, more recently, we now have studies of millions of people. So like a meta-analysis where they combine data from multiple studies, and they've studied 3.5 million people, and they found that it is true that there is this connection that we hear about now, that loneliness and living alone and social isolation can be really bad for your health, and it increases your risk of dying earlier. And from there, they've started looking at, why is that, right? What might be causing it, and we can talk about all of that. But they're starting to figure out some of that and look at the very real ways that loneliness on the one hand, or friendship and social connection on the other, actually impact your health. One for ill and one for good, right? And at the same time, I mentioned the evolutionary biologists earlier. There was work going on in animals, that in other species, like rhesus macaques and baboons primarily, but not only monkeys and apes, that was showing that even among other species, there seemed to be an importance to social relationships. And that was surprising, because baboons, for instance, are very hierarchical, right? So you might think that sitting at the top of the hierarchy would be the number one thing that would determine, like, how likely you were to survive or to have healthy babies. And those are, that's what evolution's all about, right? Surviving and then passing your genes on and having healthy babies that survive themselves. But what they found was that actually more important than hierarchy or anything else was the strength of baboons' social bonds. That was the very early science. So the baboons, essentially, with the best friends, lived longer and had more and healthier babies. And you can't do better than that. In evolutionary terms. And so those two things together, looking at health in people and looking at the fact that relationships seem to matter even in other animals, which tells us that there's a bigger story here, right? That there's been a survival of the friendliest. Those things combined to really make people say, okay, we need to pay attention to this.
Yeah, right. So interesting, because I think for so long, for so many of us, we've kind of thought about those romantic relationships as some of the most important in our lives, when in actual fact, friendships are incredibly valuable. Tell me, what's happening within our bodies when we have close friendships that bring us these incredible health benefits, like keeping us alive for longer?
These two things, like I said, loneliness on the one hand and social connection and friendship on the other, affect our cardiovascular systems. So if you are socially connected, you're less likely to have high blood pressure, for instance. They affect our immune systems. So it actually, loneliness gets into the white blood cells in your immune system and changes the way your genes express themselves. It changes your susceptibility to viruses and inflammation and things like that. So that lonely people are more susceptible and less lonely people are, more protected. It affects your risk of your mental health, so risk of depression, things like that, your cognitive health, your risk of dementia. It affects your stress responses, the quality of your sleep. It even affects the rate at which you age. So your cells have little caps on the ends called telomeres, and they shorten as we get older. That's normal, but they shorten faster in lonelier people. And so there are all kinds of ways that this is going on. And scientists don't know everything yet about exactly how that's working inside the body, but that's a pretty powerful list, I think, of ways in which it is, getting into our body. It's basically friendship gets under our skin, and it changes our cells.
This is just absolutely wild, because I think so many of us see friendship as this kind of indulgent thing, like not necessarily a priority and maybe something that we make time for if we have enough time, but it's not a priority. Now, learning about this science, is it something that we should all absolutely be making a priority in our lives?
Yes. Yes, it is. And how nice, right? Here you thought that, you needed to your friends were less important than work and then family. And it's not that work and family and things like that are not important. But it is really true that hanging out with your friends is good for you and good for them in deeply important ways. And so, you have like doctor's permission to go hang out and go to girls' night or whatever it is.
How good is that? I love it. How good is that,
right?
And so how does friendship evolve and change throughout our lives? Because for so many of us, the common thing that I hear from my own friends and, my audience and people who are listening is that it's really, you go through these points in life, and I guess probably mid-20s, maybe 30s, early 40s, we often kind of get to this point where we reevaluate and we find that we actually don't have that many friends. Whereas at university or in school or, when we first started our jobs, we had loads of friends. How does that track across populations in terms of how friendship ebbs and flows within our lives?
It's certainly true that when we're adolescents or university age, you're never going to be in a situation where you have as many potential friends around you, right? And friendship does depend to some extent on time spent together. In fact, there's a fascinating study I report on in the book, but essentially somebody calculated the amount of time you need to spend with someone to go from being an acquaintance to a friend and then a good friend and then a best friend. And it's like about 50 hours together before you really think of someone as a friend. Wow. And all the way up to about 200 hours of meaningful time together to think of them as a best friend. And that time is easy to come by if you're at, say, university together and you live in a dorm and you are in class together and you eat together and you party together and maybe you're on a team or whatever you're doing. It's much harder in your 30s, say. Now, we do spend, 200 hours easily with our colleagues when we're working in offices, if you're still working in an office. And we might become friends with some of them, but time is not the only requirement, right? Other things have to happen. There has to be, there's a kind of chemistry to friendship, just like there is to romance. And it helps if you have kind of shared interests, shared worldview, things like that. But you do need the time. You need to put in the time. Even somebody that you instinctively like the second you meet them, like to truly think of them as a good friend, you need to put in the time. And that's very hard if you have a job, if you have a family, if you have both, if you're starting now, if you're living alone or just with a significant other, you're just not naturally spending nearly as much time with your friends. And we know this, and we know how busy we feel. And, this gets to what we were saying earlier, though, about not prioritizing the time with friends. We always feel like that's the thing that can go. And I would argue, no, that's not the thing that can go. It is natural to have less time at certain times in your life, and that's okay. Like you're not going to, live your sort of college days forever. But recognizing that this is valuable beyond just the fun that you get from it is really important. And so in your, it depends a bit on, when you maybe pair up and have kids or whatever it is that starts to occupy your time. Or even if you don't, maybe your friends do, right? And then they're less accessible to you or less available to you. And then as we get older and kids grow up, where I am now, where my kids are out of the house and, my husband and I are empty nesters, but I have a lot more time, right? For my husband, for my friends, to do the things that I want to do. And people do start to spend more time with their friends again when they get later in life, but never like we did when we were in our teens and 20s, early 20s. And so the important thing to remember is that I'm not saying you need to spend, 200 hours with everybody, right? There is a kind of, for lack of a better word, a hierarchy to our friendships, or, the idea is there are some people that we like better than others, or who there are people who sustain us and people who drain us. And you want to have your closest friends that you give the most time to be the people who sustain you, because you have to understand your time as a resource, right? And you have limited time, limited energy, and you do need to put it into relationships. You can't expect them to just tick along happily if you're not paying any attention, or you're giving them short shrift. And so we do have to be, mindful of who gets that time and in what kind of priority. But you can also think of it as concentric circles, like you have in your sort of inner circle. Usually most people only have about 4 people in their inner circle. And it could be your significant other or your siblings or somebody if you're really close, or it could be all friends. Like it just depends on your personal situation. And those are the people you're going to give the most time to. And then it goes out, right? 10 to 15 people in the next circle. Those are still very important people to you, and you give them a lot of time. And then less as you move out. People you might like a lot, but you can't spend. You just don't have the time. And so I think that one of the things that people don't realize about friendship in adulthood is how much time it requires, and also some vulnerability. Like if you move to a new place, you have to put yourself out there, and we get a little bit nervous about doing that when we're older, right? Or maybe it feels more magnified because you're, when you're at a university and you're meeting all these new people, of course you're sort of putting yourself out there in a different way all the time. It's just coming naturally. That's less true when you're older. So I always like to say that, it's important to be mindful of the time and the vulnerability required. And so not to give up on it too soon. That's the other thing we do, right? We have dinner with someone and then we're like, oh, I like that person, but I don't have time, or I don't know if they liked me. Apparently there's research that says, by the way, that people tend to like you more than you think they do. Like we have a bias to think. I think that's so lovely, right? We get so, I don't know, nervous about, did I say something stupid? Was I boring, or whatever it is? And more often than not, that's not what people walked away thinking, right? So trust yourself a little bit. and get out there, but be aware that it's an investment.
This episode is brought to you by my friends at Youfoodz. I started using them this year and it's been an absolute game changer when it comes to boosting my nutrition and reclaiming my Sunday arvos from meal prepping hell. Youfoodz take on the mental load of meal prepping and deliver gourmet, nutritionally balanced meals, fresh, never frozen, right to your door. All you do is hop online, choose what you like the look of from over 60 meals that are constantly being tweaked and added to, so they're more delicious than ever before. Say bye-bye to searching for nutritious recipes full of expensive ingredients and wasting hours meal prepping meals you don't actually want to eat. Plus, there's no cooking, no dishes, and no cleanup. Make sure you use my code HELPFUL, HELPFUL, for up to $200 off your first 5 boxes. And the science also shows that whether it's, later in life and we lose a partner or, if we just don't have a romantic partner in our lives, friendship can be just as fulfilling, right, as those romantic relationships.
Absolutely. In fact, that same study that I mentioned from California, that was the very first one where they worked out this importance, this connection between relationships and health. Somebody went back later and did a deeper dive into the data looking at age and how much it mattered, like how old you were, and looking at what kind of relationships people had. And the big takeaway from that was it does really matter. Like if you're married in midlife, the people who were married were sort of that felt the most connected between like 40 and 60, but over 65, I think it was 60 or 65, it didn't matter at all. What mattered was that you had friends, that you had somebody, whether it was a friend or a spouse or didn't matter at all. And I think that's especially promising for women who tend to live longer than men, right?
Mm-hmm.
and who to know that a circle of close friends is all you need, is enough, and it is, and that there can be great strength in that, and that you will get those health benefits that we talked about from those kinds of relationships.
I love that. It's so reassuring, and again gives us another reason to prioritize those great friendships, because I think for so many women, whether you're looking for a relationship later in life, or you just feel like you need a relationship to complete your life, the idea that it doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic relationship, and you don't have to put yourself out there on all those horrible dating apps and put up with people who don't treat you the best. Just because you think you need a romantic relationship to fulfill your life. Actually, friendship could be just as valuable, if not more valuable, in your life. So I think the science behind this is fascinating, and it's absolutely wonderful. So if we get to that point in our lives, we know that there's some serious health benefits to this. But as you say, people say when they get older, it's really hard to make friends. You kind of chatted a little bit there about the fact that we need to give it time and we need to have vulnerability. But what else has your research and your work shown in terms of the best way to go about making new friends?
I wish that I don't know if this is good or bad, but the answer tends to be very straightforward, and it feels like I wish I had a fancier, more sort of counterintuitive answer, I guess. But what everything I read says is, it is about like putting yourself in places where you will find people. So, or making an effort. And by that, I mean, for instance, shared interest I mentioned is a big way that people connect. And so let's say you move to a new place, looking for groups that do things that you like to do, like maybe it's hiking or craft beer, or I don't know what it is, or volunteering. It's interesting. At the end of the book, where I'm talking about the oldest demographic, the oldest adults, I spent time in schools where they had this program that was ostensibly a program to help where sort of grandparents or grandparent age, older adults come into classrooms, and they were working with very young kids from kindergarten, first, second grade, right? And they're sort of teachers' assistants in the classrooms, and they're helping the kids. And the kids get a lot out of it. The adults get a lot of health benefits from being engaged like this. But the biggest thing is that the adults who are all involved in this school together became friends, became really good friends. And the woman that started it is the same epidemiologist who did that work, showing that friendship is as powerful as anything else in the later part of life. And she's like, it was her secret sort of friendship project. Like that was actually the goal, was to help these mostly women. They're mostly women. They're trying to get more men involved, but help them to make friends. And so volunteering is great because you get benefit no matter what, right? Because you're doing something rewarding, and we all really get a lot of benefit from feeling like we have some meaning and some purpose in our lives. But if you have shared purpose with other people, that automatically gives you something that you can connect on, and something where, you're already there, like you're self-selected to have done this particular kind of thing that is of interest to you. And so that's a great way to do it. It also is about like just being, like if there's somebody at work that you think you might like to be friends with, you need to be brave enough to take that step and say, do you want to have a drink, or, shall we chat about, something beyond work? And then you have to be willing to, or you have to recognize that it isn't always going to work. And you can't sort of, retreat back to your couch and Netflix and your, pint of ice cream. And the other thing I would say about this is that effort that's required to get you off the couch sometimes is big. But most people, when you study this, most people don't regret having got off the couch and going out to whatever it is, right? And that doesn't mean that everybody is going to enjoy the same kind of party, or that, maybe you're an introverted person and you like to socialize one-on-one versus in a big group. And that's fine. I'm not prescribing which way you do it. But it is important sometimes to make yourself get up off the couch and go do the thing that's a little harder, get back dressed up or whatever it is, and go out and make a little effort and connect, right? You can't, as we say, my kids all are basketball players, and we're like, you miss all the shots you don't take, right? You can't make a friend if you don't try to make a friend or be open to other people's overtures to you.
Absolutely. And I think, again, switching our mindset and our approach to friendships to maybe approach them more like we would approach a romantic relationship. I guess I made a really good friend at the gym. She's like one of my best friends now. But when I met her and we clicked, I asked for her number, and you feel a bit weird doing that, and you put yourself out there. But it does pay off. And then I think we have a real focus on maintaining that friendship, and we make sure that we go on little dates each week, and, we do special things. Whereas I think sometimes our relationships, particularly if you have a long-term partner or, other close relationships in your life, it can really take a backseat friendship to those romantic relationships, when in actual fact, it absolutely should be something that we prioritize. Though, if we do have long-term friends who we have just known for a long time, and we kind of feel obligated to maintain those friendships just because we've, spent a long time with them, even though, really they're not filling our cup anymore, should we cling on to those friendships? Is there value in that knowing somebody for a long time, or is it really time to let that go, as we have limited time, like you said, to nurture these friendships?
Well, there certainly is value in those long relationships. The scientific definition of friendship that I kind of arrived at from the evolutionary biologists and the anthropologists and all together is that the minimum requirements are three things: that a relationship is long lasting, that it's positive, and that it's reciprocal or cooperative. And so those people you've known since you were young, they tick that first box. So that's important. But if they don't tick the other boxes, then that's where you have a problem. And especially like the positive one is that both parties both individuals need to feel that this is a positive relationship, that this is good, and that you feel you enjoy the connection, you come away from it feeling good. Maybe not every single time, but more often than not. And also that it's the reciprocal cooperative part means that there's give and take, right? And that it's not a lopsided relationship where one person is doing all of the inviting or the contacting or all the talking. My best friend and I, when we talk, we sort of joke about like exchanging headlines. Tell me your headlines. So we make sure, no matter what, that each person's headlines get announced, kind of. And then, whoever's got more content that needs to be addressed, that's often the person then who talk. But we're really, really good at making sure that each person has gotten to kind of weigh in. And I think that's something that other people could benefit from trying to do. And so those really long relationships, I mean, it is like it becomes kind of just an assumption that person is going to stay a really close friend, and that maybe they think they're in your inner circle, but you both have to feel that that the other person is someone you want in your inner circle. Now, I will say, you don't have to tell them that they're not in your inner circle if that's not how you feel. I mentioned the concentric circles earlier, and I think of it a little bit as, sometimes we maybe shuffle people to an outer circle emotionally for ourselves, right? We don't necessarily have to say that to them. Or, I mean, you have the choice to say this really, like, there are toxic relationships out there, or relationships that just don't serve you at all. And those aren't, I mean, those aren't good. They're not good for you. They really don't give you much. So they actually take away from your health. So friendships do change over the course of our lives, and that's normal. And I think understanding that and accepting that is also important. There's a statistic in my book about childhood and adolescence so here in the US, sixth graders, so they are 11, I think, they 2/3 of sixth graders change friends between September and June, this beginning of the school year and the end of the school year, right? And part of that has to do with the American school system, where a lot of kids are switching into bigger schools, and so their world changes. It also has to do with middle school being a time where you are exploring new interests and identities. Maybe you're gravitating to being an athlete or a theater kid or whatever it is. And so you do tend to make friends with the people that you spend time with who share your interests. But I think it's so stunning that there's that much change. 2/3 of kids change friends over the course of that school year. And they all think they're the only one, right? Maybe losing their friends or, shifting. And so to know how normal that is, I think is really powerful. And then I see it as kind of a little, like a microcosm of the trajectory of friendship over the course of our whole lives. There's going to be change, right? There's not that many people you knew when you were 5 that you still know when you're 50. There's might be some. I have a few, but they're not necessarily the people that I'm closest to right now. But and that's okay. I am also someone who does like to maintain friendships and connection, but I give the most time to the people in that inner circle, and that's why those relationships are so rich for me.
Yeah, and that's beautiful to know. And that reciprocity is really interesting, because I think so often lots of us have those relationships where either we're the person who's always inviting them out or, trying to ask them to do things, or we're the person which I have definitely been guilty of, who takes a back seat and lets that person come to you. But knowing that reciprocal nature in the friendship is really important can also help us to nurture those close relationships in a beautiful way. If we want to really give back to those friendships and ensure that they are really close relationships, so there are other things that we should absolutely be doing, as well as like being conscious of making them a priority and knowing about that reciprocity.
Yes, I think that the science and this definition that I gave you, that friendships are long-lasting, positive, a quality friendship is long-lasting, positive, and cooperative or reciprocal, is also a guide to how to be a good friend. So, right, the first part, the long-lasting part, is to be a steady, reliable presence in somebody's life, which means paying attention, noticing if they need, right? Checking in, sending little funny texts if you don't have time for a call or whatever, or coffee, at least send a joke or something. Show up, pay attention, notice, be reliable. And then the positive part is be kind, right? Be nice. Tell people what you appreciate about them. I mean, if, for instance, like you said, you're not necessarily the one doing all the organizing and inviting people out, and maybe that really is not your comfort spot, but then notice and say, hey, it really means a lot to me that you organize and you connect us, and please don't stop, and know that I appreciate it. And that's not my superpower, but I'm down for it. Acknowledging what you love about your friends is we sometimes we don't actively do. We don't try to say, here's what I love about you so much. And then the last part, the cooperative and reciprocal part, is to be helpful, to show up again, right? Show up like, to hold up your side of the friendship in that case is what I mean. Show up means so many different things in the context of friendship, but it's all of it is important. So any context in which you understand that, go for it. But so be reliable, be kind, and be helpful, and show up, notice, pay attention, all of that.
How has this research and how has everything that you've learned about friendship made how you approach friendship different in your own life?
Well, I try really hard to do those things I just named. Showing up, being kind, being thoughtful, being helpful. And I don't always succeed. I went through some hard personal stuff in recent years, and I was a little less available to the people who weren't in my inner circle because I didn't really feel like talking about everything that was going on with me. But now I'm making a point of reconnecting and saying, hey, sorry, I've been a little bit absent, but I'm back. And my very closest friends who really helped me get through my difficult stuff have been real rocks. And I've acknowledged that. And I've also said, I know it's been a little lopsided because I was having such a hard time. And so, you've had to listen to a lot, and, I'm ready to listen to you too, or please make sure you raise your hand if you have something you want to talk about too. Don't feel like your stuff doesn't matter. When, if one person's crisis seems more serious, you can feel like your own stuff is less important. But, so I definitely make a priority of hanging out with my friends. I mean, granted, it's a little easier for me with no kids in the house, but I have a busy job and elderly mother that I have to care for and all kinds of things. I have plenty of obligations, and so it is still something that it's even more something that I try to prioritize and make time for whenever I can.
I love that. I really like that. And I think so often sometimes we can feel guilty or like we're putting upon people if we ask them to help us or we want them to listen. But if we don't do that, we're actually robbing them of something that can bring them a lot of joy. People like, I listened to another podcast episode, I think it was from the Happiness Lab, about friendship and asking for help. And it's scientifically proven that people actually love helping you out. So if you want, and they get boosts of endorphins and, a little serotonin hit every time they help you out. So I have taken now to asking more for help. And, I guess that goes back to that vulnerability piece too, that you're talking about. People really enjoy that.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And most people, if they offer help, they mean it. If they offer and then you ask and then they don't follow through, then you go, okay, I see that they were trying to say the right thing. They didn't, they don't really have the bandwidth to do it. Fine. But some people will. I mean, it's a little like during the pandemic, how I think that there was an interesting thing that happened where all of our circles got smaller. And then the people that you really connected with in that time, there was a special bond that came out of that. And a lot of it had to do with how you were handling it. And it was easier. My joke was that we had to navigate friendship in that time the way you have to navigate consent in sexual relationships. It was like everybody had different tolerance for risk and different, and so we found certain people that we could get through that time with better than others. And then we also found, like, who did we miss and who did we not miss so much, and then I think that was kind of instructive. But I also feel like, the thing I wanted to say is that evolutionary biologists, and this is getting to what you alluded to about how we like to help. Like, really, the purpose of friendship is that you build a bench of people who are there for you when you need them. I mean, for a baboon in Africa, it's about help finding food and fighting off predators. When the lions come running across the savannah, you want a whole group of other baboons. You don't want to be alone, right? Quite literally. And so in our lives, the lions are out there. They just aren't actual lions, but they're there. And we build up the rewarding elements of friendship and the fun we get from it, and that we keep coming back for more, has us strengthening those bonds so that when the lions show up, the friends are there for us. And calling on your friends when you need them is really what it is about. Evolutionarily, it is what it is about, why we have friends in the first place.
I love that. And again, that makes us feel less guilty about asking for help and not like we're a burden, but more that shift in my mindset has been that I'm offering people the opportunity to do something that's going to really make them feel good. And that makes you feel easier about reaching out. I love it. So if we only take one thing out of everything you've learned about friendship, what's the main thing you want people to take away?
Value
you can have
it.
two if you need.
Yeah. Call your friends. It really is this idea that friendship is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's not I'm losing the word. It's
not indulgent.
Yeah, it's not indulgent, and it's not frivolous. It's serious. It's serious stuff. It really matters. And so we should treat it like that. We should treat it with the respect that it deserves.
Yeah. And I guess if you're listening to this and you're feeling like, oh, damn, well, it's made me feel even more terrible that I don't have that many friends right now. Hopefully you can use that, code for friendship and that idea around what friendship truly is to help you navigate to get to some of those more meaningful relationships. And the other thing that I've learned about making friends, particularly because that's been a focus for me this year, because I moved to Australia and it's really hard to make friends when you move somewhere in kind of in your early 30s when everyone else is doing different things. And also, like, me and my husband, we've been together for 16 years. So I kind of, again, was guilty of doing that thing where you only invest in the romantic relationship. But one of the things I've learned about making friends recently this year is giving it time. Like, even if that's not necessarily giving time to the friendship, but giving time to showing up somewhere every week so that people see you there. They start to say hello. They start to get comfortable and they recognize you as somebody who shows up. And again, I think that shows them that you're open and you're available and making yourself vulnerable, and approach this more like you would dating, I think is going to be really helpful. Yeah.
That's true. And actually, there's one other thing I want to say that's really important to the people who might be thinking, well, I don't have friends, or maybe even I don't. There are people out there who say, I don't need friends. This is all crap.
Oh, I think that was me for a bit. I thought, I didn't need it.
Well, so I think you're all wrong. I think everybody benefits.
I think I'm wrong too.
But I also, and by the way, your spouse can fit that definition of friendship, of a really quality relationship, or your significant other and your sibling. If you tell me your spouse is your best friend, or your sister is your best friend, you're telling me something extra. There's added value about, how you see the relationship. So that's important. But the thing I wanted to convey is that if you ask me how many friends you need to have, my answer is one. Actually, just one. Like the biggest step change in the health benefits comes from 0 to 1, between 0 and 1. And yes, like it's great to have some different friends and have a little bit of a bench and have more, different friends who serve different purposes in your life, or who, somebody to step up if somebody else sort of disappears on you. But really, one friend can make a massive amount of difference in terms of feeling like you have that person out there. So you don't have to have, big groups of friends. You don't have to have multiples. You really just need one.
Quality over quantity.
Quality over quantity. Absolutely. Thank you. That's yes.
I love it. Oh, Lydia, this has been such a joy. Thank you so much for chatting to me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Lydia Denworth is a science writer and author of Friendship, the Evolution, Biology, and Extraordinary Power of Life's Fundamental Bond. I don't know about you, but that has completely changed the way I now think about friendships. I've kind of moved more to making more friends recently, but for a long time, because I've been in a long-term relationship for so long, I didn't really make it a priority, but I've definitely found now through making more friends and prioritizing them, it's definitely life enhancing. Though it can be so tricky making friends as an adult, I really think finding something that you love doing, committing to doing that, and showing up consistently every week makes a big difference. For a long time, I thought that if I just went to one class or one meetup, I'd start to make friends. But I think there's a lot to be said for turning up again and again and people seeing you and you getting comfortable. I think that's really key to making friends, in my experience anyway. And Lydia had some great tips there too. Make sure you do check out the book because there's a lot more in this. I'll pop the link in the show notes and the links to where you can find Lydia and more of her work, because she does do some really cool science journalism that I know you'll love. I am so grateful to you for joining me. Don't forget, if you're a video podcast fan, I know, hello 2024, you can find me on Spotify. I know I figured out how to get a video podcast on there. Go ahead. And you can also find me on YouTube. The links are in the show notes. If you just like listen to audio, no stress at all. I love having you here, and I am a bit of an audio fiend myself as well. So there's no shade if you're not into the video podcast, but make sure you check them out if that's your thing, because I have learned how to edit video and I'll be damned if no one watches it. So take one for the team and check it out. If you are enjoying the series so far, do make sure you subscribe. It will make sure that they pop up in your feed every week and you don't miss out. I've got some great episodes that I'm really excited about coming up for you. And if you are enjoying it, please leave me a review wherever you're listening. I really appreciate it. I've had some absolutely beautiful ones and they really make me so bloody happy. And I think they help other people to find us. You've got to assume they have. I don't know. It's all a bit of a mystery. But anyway, I'd really appreciate it if you could take 2 minutes and leave me a review wherever you're listening. I'm Ed Stott, and I sincerely hope that's helpful.